to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast where small business owners are celebrated as the backbone of the American economy. Each week, we introduce you to tycoons who share their stories and advice so that small business owners may learn from their experiences. Tycoons is powered by Backbone Planning Partners. Join us now as our hosts connect you to today's Tycoons.
Good afternoon, Tycoons, and welcome to today's episode of Tycoons of Small Biz. I'm your host here, as always, Austin Peterson, coming to you live from Phoenix, Arizona. And today we've got a definite tycoon on the program. He's going to talk about a lot of the things that he does personally, what he's done in his past, I should say, and the way that he works with business owners today. So I'm excited to welcome Damon Pistulka from Seattle, Washington, or Edmonds, Washington, to the show. Damon, welcome.
Thanks for having me here today, Austin.
Yeah, Damon, excited to talk to you about this. There's a decent amount of crossover in the things that we do for business owners, and what you do inside of your firm is so important for business owners to be aware of and to do certain things to prepare themselves to eventually exit their business, whatever that looks like. So excited to jump into that, but would love to hear a little bit about you and your family personally first before we jump into the business side of things.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Austin. Well, and thanks for inviting me to be here today. Yeah, it's, me looking at my background. I grew up on a large family farm in South Dakota. And someone told me that I would be living by the Puget Sound, doing what I do, helping business owners build and sell businesses. I would have never, ever thought it. You hear some people that go, I want to be this or I want to be that when they're a kid, and that's what they do. Mine was a pretty circuitous route that got here after I realized going to engineering school. Oldest of three brothers and other brothers and a sister, so 5 kids in our family, and first one in our family to go to college. I got an engineering degree and started working in manufacturing companies, and before I knew it, I was given an opportunity to build and run some companies in manufacturing, and then ultimately facilities, and then companies. And as I was doing it for the companies, running the manufacturing companies, I was doing that for investment owners. And it opened my eyes to a very different world. And that is where you buy a company at a value as an investment, and you grow that company to another value, and you exit and realize the returns of your investment. And growing up and then also in the businesses I worked up until then, early in my career, they were family-owned businesses. They were going from generation to generation, or just perpetuous businesses they're perpetual businesses that were moving on. So this is a really interesting time for me, because I was able to lead these companies through the growth and the sale, and buy other ones and do this similar things again. And I discovered how much I really enjoyed that process of understanding what you need to do in a business to drastically change its trajectory and really help it do things maybe a little bit differently to set itself apart in the market, and then exit and realize the value. And it's something that I just loved. I don't know even how to say it, because when I found it, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I ended up doing it a few more times for other groups and stuff. And ultimately in 2015, I partnered with my partner, Andrew Cross, now, who we met in one of these companies I had been doing this for earlier, to do what we're doing now in Exit Your Way, helping individual business owners do this. And I'm doing it day in and day out. I wake up and I feel so lucky to be able to do it. I just absolutely positively love to do every single day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. Relate to a lot of things in your story. Actually, I grew up on a farm as well. Spent most of my childhood on a farm. If you would have told me that I was gonna go to college or have an MBA or own a business or help, some of the wealthiest business owners in the country with things that are really important to them and to their families, I mean, it just wouldn't have fit, right? I mean, it just, it would seem so far out there. And, I was also the first in my family to go to college. My parents both had GEDs. So it was, it was a stretch, so much so that I got my associate's degree. And then about a year and a half later, when it was time to get my bachelor's degree, and I called my parents and told them, I'm going to send you guys
Yeah.
plane tickets to come to graduation. They were confused. Wait a minute, you graduated a year ago. What do you mean there's another graduation? So it's interesting, how much our stories parallel each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I look at other people and I just realized how fortunate I was to be able to go to college and subsequently be able to do what I do. And even though it was a challenging route for my parents, I think ultimately they were happy I did.
Yeah. And I mean, I've got younger brothers that don't have college degrees, and they're doing just fine. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not
Yep.
the only way to be successful in this world, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's kind of jump in. So one of the things that you mentioned was, that most businesses are family owned, and that was essentially all you were kind of exposed to before getting involved with these investor owned businesses. And the reality is you're spot on. The statistics, I believe, are 87% of the businesses in our country are family owned businesses. And so, that's the reality. But just because it's a family owned business doesn't mean that some of the things that you guys do wouldn't benefit those companies as well.
Yeah, and when you look at it too, I think, isn't it something like 16% or something like those families of family businesses actually transition to the second generation? So, the other 84% of them are hopefully going to be sold for a lot of money if when they're ready to get out of them, and that's really where we play, is understanding what you really need to do to a business to make it valuable to the next person. And that next person can be your children or your grandchildren or whoever it is, but you really need to understand who your buyer is and make your company attractive to them. And that's, family owned businesses are not immune to exit. Transitioning generations is no different really than selling a business to a different owner. And what was great for the founders or the second generation may not be even close to what the third generation wants or the fourth generation wants. So you really have to make sure that you're continuing to evolve that business and evolve the performance of that business so that it can continue to support that family as long as you want it to.
Yeah. No, you're right. So I don't know for sure if the 16% that you quoted is the right number. I don't remember that one, but I do remember the percentage that passes to the third generation, because it's extremely low.
Yeah.
It's 3%.
Yep. That's what I thought too, is 3%. And I just looked this up a few weeks ago, and because it is so low, really, you'd think that, and this is, I don't think size makes a difference. I know in some of this, but not a lot really. And sometimes, unfortunately or fortunate enough, the next generation just simply does not want to be involved.
Yeah.
And there's different things you have to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, right? There can be internal family strife, of course, that comes in.
Oh, yeah.
But even just if you think about it, let's say that I start the business, right? Well, I want to pass it on to my 2 kids, right? So now there's 2 people in one business. So like you said, is the business large enough, and do they get along? And then let's say each of my kids have 2 kids. Are we going to pass it to then 4 people at that point and have 2 kids? You know what I'm saying? Like, it becomes extremely large at some point. And the question is, can the business support that many people? Do they want to be involved in the business? Are they going to do what it takes to make sure that it continues to be successful? There's just so many aspects of family transitions that really get complicated with businesses.
And you bring up some great points. And I think those are the same points that make a family business that you want to support your family for generations and an investor-owned business very similar, because you have to be consistently monitoring that performance of that business, thinking to the future to understand where are we going? What is that value we need to be, or how much money do we need every year? Like you said, it goes from 2 to 4 to whatever it would be after that, 8 or whatever the multiple, and it goes up pretty fast. But if you're thinking you have to support that many families with your business, you better be monitoring the performance of that business and growing it appropriately to be able to hit those milestones when you need to.
Yep, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of start at the beginning. You know, anybody who's listening to this, they're building a business. They may be in different stages. Some are, you know, aspiring entrepreneurs that are listening. Some have a business that's, you know, up and running. And then there are some who have a full enterprise level business that have, you know, 20, 30, 50 employees and are building some decent revenue. But let's start at the beginning, like I said, with what you would say are your keys to building a business that can be sold.
Yeah. From the beginning, I think you need to understand what you want to create, because that will throughout the entire life cycle of your business. Because if you say, listen, I want to create a plumbing company that services my area better than anyone else, and my exit plan is I want to give it to my kids, or I want to sell it to some other competitor in the area when I'm done for this much dollars. I mean, you really, that helps to drive the way you're going to run your business. Because if you don't do that, you can lump along and start making enough money to make a living, but you really can fall short of where you want to go if you want to do the others and build a business that gives you so much money. And this is where I think a lot of people fall into this trap, is like, okay, I'm making a few bucks now. Now I'm making enough money to make a living and I'm supporting my family, blah, blah, blah. And they stop there. And they really don't go, how much do I need to create in wealth from my business? Because it's a wealth generating machine. They look at it as a job when you start out, but you soon have to make that flip and go, this is going to generate the wealth for me in my long term. And if I don't get, I have to make it do that. A lot of people do anyway. And
Yep.
So you really have to look at that and you go, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to make a living plus this much that's going to get invested every year, and I'm going to run my business for 20 years and I really don't care? Does that mean that I'm going to accelerate and grow my business to X million in value over the next so many years and sell it at that point? I mean, you really have to understand where you envision this thing going, even if it's wrong, because you have to have a direction. Because starting without a direction, I think, is one of the things that we all can get into real easily. But if you don't see where you're going, you're going to go a lot of different routes and you're not going to get anywhere close to where you want to be.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely important, right? I mean, there's this shift of a mindset. So first, let me say this: building or having your own company just to provide yourself a job, absolutely fine. If that's what you're hoping to do, and you may never sell your business, and that's fine too. You just have to plan outside of your business selling for anything for your own financial independence, right? So, but if that's not the case, and you do want to build it a little bit bigger, and you're somewhat reliant, which most business owners in our country are very much reliant on the worth or the value of their business to provide their own financial independence later, you have to start with this mindset shift of, this is not my job. This is an asset or an investment that I own. I also work there, but this is an asset or an investment that I own.
Exactly. Yep. And you gotta make a return on that investment like everything else.
Yep. Yeah. And that could be an annual return, right? In terms of profits from the business. And it can also be capital appreciation, to where you sell that business for a certain amount, hopefully a large amount later in life as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We see that in smaller businesses. A lot of, people can have you can have $1 million, $2 million, say, plumbing restoration business, something local that they're making pretty good money out of. And if you really look and, 10 years before you're ready to exit, you're not going to succeed at, you're going to just exit this thing. If you really understand and are investing your money well, and and I always like this in the smaller business, because you should be investing all along, investing some of your profits from your money all along, because you never know what's going to happen to the business. But when I see it successfully done, it's so cool, because we had a client, it's like 6-7 years ago now, that had a small restoration business. Went in and helped him get some things organized, and really he about doubled the business. And it still wasn't that big a business, but we said, listen, what you've been living on what you had before, take the extra and invest that, because he had a goal, an investment goal at the end. And I said, we're not investment advisors. I said, but if I was you and you need this much money, this is how we would get it. And he had 5 or 6 years before he wanted to be out of the business. And he did it. It was really cool. Last year, he grew the business, invested the extra money wisely, and then sold his business last year for about the, what the value it was worth. But the combination of the two things gave him a very nice retirement, and he's able to go off, and now he does missionary work. So good stuff for him.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, because the reality is, we tell our clients that you should always be taking some chips off the table, right? Moving some money from the business balance sheet to the personal balance sheet to prepare for your own financial independence outside of the business. And then if we can sell the business for more, then it becomes the cherry on top. And at the very least, for a guy like you or anybody who's helping them, to actually go through that transaction at that point, it puts everybody in a better negotiating position, because you don't need the money to retire. Yeah, it is a much better situation to be in either I don't need the money, or I don't need to stretch what my business is worth, right? Because that's the other thing that's really bad. It's like you get to the end and you say, well, I still need, $5 million, but my business is worth 3, but I hope I'm going to get 5, right? We're going to just go out and get 5. That doesn't happen, because business value is math. And it's simple return on the investment, right? You can only invest so much, because you only get the return out of the business where it's at today. And that's how people buy businesses. So you're so right there that you have to have, your personal investments in the right place, your business value in the right place, compared to what your end number you need as a net proceeds from that business, or you're going to fall short, and then it's going to mean some changes. Yeah. Well, and you should always know what that number is.
Yes.
Right? I'm sure you've had instances where you've sat down with a business owner and you just, talk to them about the value of their business, or what do you want to sell it for, or what are you building toward? And they'll throw out a number and pick a number. It could be 5 million, it could be 10, it could be 1, right? Whatever that number is. But if you dig a little bit further to try to find out why they choose that number, they typically don't know. A lot of times it's, oh, so-and-so sold it for that much, and so I assume I can get, that much as well. But as a business owner, you need to know what's called the value gap, right? What is the difference between what you have and what you need? And that gap's got to be filled with something. It's either your own personal savings over time, or the business, or a combination of the two. But that is your value gap, and you need to know that number at all times.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we do before we start to sell a business. If they can't tell us that, we get them in touch, or have them talk to their financial advisors to do that. Because when you do that, or when you don't do it, it's the difference between going through a business sale knowing that I'm going to be okay, or not okay, or wondering. And what happens a lot when you wonder is you'll go into a business sales situation. They've told me I could get a few $1 million for it. That's pretty good. And you're wondering, and you get to the end and it's like, no, I just can't do it, because I don't know. I'm not confident in that, blah, blah, blah. But when you take the time to go through your lifestyle for whatever's next with a financial advisor, and say, listen, I want a second home. We're going to travel this much. I'm going to start this other business. I'm going to have these philanthropic ventures. want to drop some things for the kids, grandkids, whatever it is. Put all that together and shake it up and do the calculations that you need to get that number out. That is so powerful, because then we come in, we take that and we say, hey, Austin, your number is $5 million. We believe your business is worth $7.2 million. And here's what it's going to cost you. You're going to have to take capital gains out. You're going to have to take the fees to sell the business. You got to pay down some debt with that, whatever it is. You're going to end up with $5.9 million or whatever the heck the number is. And you can go into that final discussion is getting ready to sign the dotted line when someone says they want to buy that for $5.9 million or $6 million, knowing that I've already done my homework on this and I've got a little cushion from what they said. I will be just fine for what I want to do next in my life. That is crazy powerful, because you can sign that thing and understand that you're going to be okay. Or you can choose not to do that ahead of it, and you can get to the end, you can get cold feet, not sign it, and you may never get that $5.9 million or $6.2 million again, because getting to the point to where you can get a deal done is not that easy. And you want to make sure that you are pretty confident in the value that you're going to get for it is going to make sure it's going to give you what you need to get there, because there's too many deals die when you don't know that.
Yep. Knowing the number is super important, and knowing that has to be your net number, right?
Net number. Yep.
You can sell a business for 6 million, but only actually receive 1.5 when everything's all said and done. Pay taxes, depreciation, recapture, all these kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be about what you're going to receive when you're done. And in order to have that number 100% locked in, you have to have good advisors around you.
Yeah. I mean, when we get to work with our clients for, say, 3 to 5 years ahead of time, we start to practice in the last 36 months, we start to practice red zone thinking. And that really, comes from football, obviously, but red zone thinking means that I am not buying the brand new $1 million whiz bang piece of equipment unless I really need it, because I get to pay that thing off when I sell my business. I don't need 40 new trucks for my fleet. I just need to be replacing them when they need to be replaced, so that I don't have all this extra debt on the books that I have to, because their net can go down like crazy. I mean, we've had clients that, like you said, 4 or 5 years ago, we had a client was worth about $13 million, but on the books and after net proceeds, we're only going to be about $1 million. And it was just simply, they were in a huge ramp up phase and had a lot of debt on the books that they needed to take care of because of that. And in about 30 months, we had the value was triple that, but also we had paid down a lot of debt. And, these are the things you can do when you really start to think about this and go, okay, I've got a target I'm going for, an exit time, exit value, and working towards it, because that red zone, those last couple, 3 years, especially if you're going to transfer a lot of money and you're not looking at it 6, 7, 8 years ahead of time and going, okay, what do I have to do now to mitigate capital gains taxes when I sell in 6 or 7 years? Because there's some of these tax things that can save literally hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for people that are going to be, if you got 10 million, something like that for your business, you can save $1 million in capital gains just by doing work. But some of that takes 5 years of hold time or wait period. And I don't know the specifics around it. I just know I've talked to a lot of smart lawyers and other people around taxes that help people do this. And I'm amazed at what you can do when you really think ahead on those kind of things as well.
Yep. No, you're absolutely correct. And so, we tell people all the time that exit planning is a process, not an event.
Mm-hmm.
And we would prefer working with a business owner at least 3 years before their eventual exit to do some of these things that you're talking about. So let's talk about those specifics, right? I mean, one of the things that you mentioned is that there's the ability from time to time to quadruple the value of your business within that 36 months. So
Mhm.
specifically, what are some of the types of things that people should be thinking about if they're thinking, man, I want to exit my business in 36 months? What should they be doing now to increase the value of their business?
Yeah. First thing, growth. You can run your business today with flatline growth, right? I've been in it 15 years. We got 10 million in revenue. I make plenty of money. I'm happy, right? It's not going to work so good when you go to sell it, because the buyer's going to look at it as they're paying you for that $10 million business or revenue business, whatever the value is of that thing. But then they're also going to look at it and they're going to say, "Bo, what if this happens? What if I lose the biggest customer? What if the market turns against me? What if I this?" And they're going to start, the risk is going to start to drive their value down on what they want. Now, in a flatline business, that's a pretty big deal, because that just means I go from 10 million to 9 million to 8 million in their mind. Might have never happened, may never happen, but they still are looking for risk. What if interest rates go up on me? What, blah, blah, you know, that. So we look at growth and we say, look at that same business now that was flatlined. What if we had 20, 25% growth? What if we have 50% growth? How many problems does 20+% growth cover up? I can lose that customer. I can screw something up. I still am going to be able to at least pay my debt and hopefully make a return on my investment yet at that point. That same business that was flatline is going to get discounted like crazy. That business that's growing is going to get sold. There's just a difference between the two. I mean, we see it every day. We try over time. Some of our clients, they just say, "Hey, we make good money. We're doing this." You can get them sold, but it's not nearly at the value you can in a growing business. Because if that business is growing and we've got a track record of growth, and we say, and this is where we're going, we're projecting to go. I've already said where we're going to be, and we're on our way there, and we're going here. You can actually get a bit more for the value of your business than where it's at today by doing that. I mean, we've seen it up to 25, 30% in extreme growth situations. And it's really the difference between making a business that's more easily saleable than one that you're going to just have to grind to get that thing sold. And then you're going to suffer the discounts.
Yeah.
So growth is the first thing. The second thing is knowing where you're going to sell your business and making it attractive to that business. Because if I'm a really smart guy and I can run a $50 million electrical contracting company in Seattle, Washington here, and my team is kind of so because I'm a really smart guy and I'm one of those people that wants to work 7 days a week, and but I don't have my company set up very well. We run it out of a checkbook, blah 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 blah. That is gonna just about kill you when it comes to time to sell a business. You need to know what your buyer is expecting from what kind of business they're expecting to see, and you need to make your business look like that. And that means that I can't be too involved in it. I can be a leader, I can be a strategic visionary of that business, but if I'm the one that's the hub of that business, I'm the one that makes sure I've got the relationships with the big clients, I make sure that everything happens like it's supposed to. When I walk away, that business is not worth very much. And that's the buyer's perspective on that. And like I said, when we're looking at the business, and this leads into the last one, is the team you create. Because when the buyers expect it, and when you get into, not a solopreneur, but a pretty small business, say $1 million, $2 million, even $3, $4, $5 million in revenue, you really have to have a good middle leaders, that can execute what's going on and kind of keep the thing going. But you can be a CEO level. That's kind of in that smaller business range, down from, I might just have good people that execute what we need to do, and I'm leading the whole thing, right? In a small, whatever business. But as it gets bigger, you need to start elevating yourself and building a better team under you. Like I said, I can run a $50 million business because I want to work 7 days a week and I want to do it all. I can run that business and I can make tons of money off that business, but I'm not going to sell that business. And I won't sell it for two reasons. One is people will just pass. They won't give you any money. Or two, if they offer you something, it's going to be so ridiculously low that you're not going to take it anyway.
Yeah.
So, and we had a client a few years ago that was 4 or 5 years ago now, 40 million in revenue, making 8 million EBITDA, should have been getting offers into the 40-50 million dollar range. We're getting them in the 15-20 because all the owners were key in the business, made some changes, did some other things, grew it a little bit and sold it for 70 3 years later. It's just like, these are the things that when you really understand what you're doing and is what your company needs to look like for that buyer, it's what you have to do. But so we're talking about the small, sub $1 million EBITDA to, a couple million in EBITDA or profitability. It's kind of what you need to have. You have to have, you're truly a CEO or you're a board member and the rest of the company's running for you. Well, when you get above that and you go, okay, now I'm close to 5 million in EBITDA, or I'm a little bit above that, whatever it is, you really better have a team that can develop and execute a 5-year strategy for your business without you around.
Yep.
You got to be on the board. You got to be driving the big, long things like, what are we investing in? What are we, and you're not even the ones that you're deciding that. You're just asking the questions, right? How are we growing my investment? More kind of thing. You have to be on that level because you're investment buyer. You're an investment buyer territory at that point. There's probably going to be an investment buyer for you, and they will not buy a business that can't do that on its own because they're in the investing business. They're not in the business running business. They're in the investing. They invest in good teams, good business plans, and good growth potential. It comes back to the things that that I talked about the growth and everything, and it just gets more critical as your business gets bigger. And those are the three things that really do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, in the growth phase, you kind of embedded in there customer concentration, right? So look out for is not having too much revenue coming from one or a very small number of customers. And then owner dependency. That's the hardest one for owners to get past, is that the less you do in the business, the less the day-to-day is dependent on you, the more your company is worth. And it's hard because your ego wants to say, I built this company needs me. It will not be as good as it can be without me. Well, that might be true, but it's not going to be worth as much money if you're the one who has to run it and make all the decisions day to day.
Yeah. Again, it's the buyer's perspective. Your perspective is that, and that's correct, could be correct. But the buyer's perspective is it's way reduced if you're in that role. Because when you, even if you'd say you're going to stay with the business, they still will discount it because they'll know that if you get millions of dollars for your business, your incentive to work just changed an awful lot overnight.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's critical to invest in the teams. And I talk, and that all goes, like you said, with customer concentration and systems and everything behind it. The more you can button those things up, the better off you are. The better off you are. I mean, when you can set, especially if you're going to be selling into that investment buyer space, the better off, the more time you spend on KPIs, monthly board meeting type situations where you really are reviewing your financials and going through those kind of things, and have an advisory board to where they can just come in and drop a couple of people on the board. They don't have to teach everybody what the heck this is. It's huge. It's huge because you're inviting them into a familiar environment that they don't see often when they go out to look for companies. And you are distinguishing yourself from everyone else or a lot of other people by putting these things in place to make it very comfortable for them to drop in as the next owners.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just stark, the difference. I mean, I've seen,
Yeah.
we've been involved in a couple of different transactions recently where one, the owners, so two husband and wife owners are, the business is very dependent on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're still getting a decent multiple, but really because it's a highly profitable business as compared to revenue, right? The flip side to that is everything that you just described, having a business that's quickly growing, some organic, some through acquisition, but they've got everything kind of set up. They've hit that magic number of about 5 million in EBITDA. And this is not a sexy business. This isn't a tech startup. This isn't, whatever. This is a home services type of a business, construction related type of a business. And they're closing this week for a 16.5 multiple of that 5 million in EBITDA.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can, when you put together the right team, you have the right customer focus, and you can, and it's something that people can see it real easily when they come into your business. And on all the other things around it, like you said, growth by acquisition is huge. This is something, honestly, our growth by acquisition has gone through the roof in the last couple of years. And I think for business owners looking to exit, it is one of the things they should seriously be considering, because if I can buy 3 other smaller companies around me, and now I'm double the size that I was before, and I can identify a couple more acquisitions and get them down the road, then I can sell with acquisitions that are ready to do. Investors want to invest. If I just gave them the opportunity, I've done 3, everything's working well, and I've got 2 or 3 more that are lined up, or even a couple after that I would go to next. Holy heck, we just laid the runway down for them to invest a lot more money, and that's what they love. If you're in that kind of size business where you're doing that, you just gave them the next 3 to 5 years of investment, and you look at, for them, the value curve, as businesses get bigger, the multiple per dollar of profit gets better, right? And that, and that allows them, the new buyers and the investors, to really take advantage of that with these big jumps in value as they buy these new companies, and the multiple increases on every dollar of profit they have. It's, when you are doing it like you're talking about there, when you've got somebody that's doing growth by acquisition, it's a huge thing, because I've got an experienced team that's done it, that is ready to do it again. And all we have to do is plug the money in.
Yep. Which is that's music to an investor's ears, right?
Yep.
Like what can our capital do to add fuel to this fire to take it from here to here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they're interested in. And you just have to know who your buyer is and set your business up appropriately for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's kind of dig in a little bit different, or a little bit more on the buyer's perspective, right? So we've talked about it a little bit, but I feel like there's more that we can uncover here. So what's the buyer's perspective, and how does their viewpoint of the business affect the sale of the business itself?
Well, the risk is something that I think all sellers underestimate, right? You talked about customer concentration and risk. That risk with that customer, because maybe I've got one customer 75% of my business, and when I started, they might have been a fair size of my business, and over every year it goes up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And now that 75% might be $10 million, might be $20 million in revenue every year. And the rest of my business might be $5 or $10 million. Well, that risk to you grew over time, very small increments every year, every decade, whatever it is. But what you're asking a buyer to do is to assume all that risk all at once, that customer leaving. And that risk perspective and the buyer's perspective of risk is so much different that we really have to put a different pair of shoes on and look from the other side if we're going to be thinking about it, because it's all sides. It's the same thing as if I've got a supplier I've only got one supplier. If my market is really limited, or there's just so many different risks that a buyer will consider. It's like suppliers, another one, great one. It's like, well, we've had the same supplier for 20 years. I know Susan, she's great. We're buddies. We, blah, blah, blah. That built over time. That relationship built over time. Coming in new, I have no relationship. What's gonna mean? And again, another one that people fail to realize is, if I'm the owner and I'm selling the business, and Susan, who's been supplying me for 25 years, we've been doing business like this, they're the same age as I am, and I'm leaving now, that buyer is also going to wonder, well, what happens when she leaves?
Yeah.
Because it could go to heck and I could be down. I mean, it's just a lot of difference, because they're putting down millions of dollars right then. You built those millions up over time. And it's really and I always tell people that are selling their business, said, would you, knowing what you know today about your business, write the check for this business and pay it back? Would you sign and pay someone the money and pay it back over time with your business today? Because if you wouldn't, how the heck can you expect somebody else?
Yep.
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, you have to put yourself in their shoes, right? You have to understand and convey. I mean, the reality is, a buyer feels much more comfortable if the seller is pointing out to them the risks of the business, rather than just pointing out positives and counting them to find the risks in the business.
Yep. If, it's like we talked about supplier risk, right? If you said, I know you're worried about supplier because we always buy from Susan, we bought for 25 years, but we buy from Susan because they give us the best products. And we have Dave and Jeannie, they can give us the same products. And we buy a little bit from them every once in a while to make sure their products are good. We check them and once every year, every other year, to make sure they could supply us if we really needed it. We got multiple suppliers. That right there can help you to mitigate that risk for that buyer. If you don't, if I just said, we've been doing business with Susan for years and she's great, blah, 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 blah. They're stuck in their mind on that. I got one supplier. But if you just said, no, I've got 3 suppliers and they can all do this, it's a big deal. It's a big deal as putting those shoes on and understanding it.
Yep. There are other options. We choose to do business with Susie because of X, Y, and Z, but we could easily go this direction if something changed with Susie.
Yeah. Yep.
And
I think it's a huge thing. It's a huge thing. I mean, and in this day and age too, when you look at some of we do a fair amount of e-commerce work, right? And when you look at what happened over the past 3 years, and the wicked rise in Amazon sales for people. And I think it's really one of these things that you have to look at. Amazon's no different than a customer in a lot of respects. And if that concentration there gets too high as an e-commerce company, you really have to look at, how do we diversify? And when you're doing, or up here, just take for up here, if I'm doing aerospace work and I'm doing it for Boeing, right? You can have, or in Detroit, I'm doing automotive, or, someplace else and I'm doing space work. You really got to understand how you diversify yourself enough so that it doesn't look like you're one step away from the grave. I mean, the suppliers here from Boeing, when the 737 had their trouble, that took them almost, what was it, a year and a half or more to get it straightened out. There is just like for sale signs everywhere. So, the investors aren't wrong in a lot of this. If you can't diversify very well, it is more risky.
Yeah, no, I agree. And just to make sure I understood what you meant by the e-commerce thing, you're saying if your business is highly dependent on, or your only sales channel is Amazon, that's a risk. You need to be selling
Yeah.
through your own website and other e-commerce, sites.
Yeah. I mean, there's Walmart, there's eBay, there's all the different kinds of places that you can sell. And man, there are actually so many that would boggle your mind where you can sell different places, but it really, the diversification is diversification. It just has to be like that. There were a huge number of companies that raised a lot of money pre-COVID and through COVID to buy Amazon-based companies, and they have virtually stopped buying companies because, the e-commerce has slowed over the last 12 months a fair amount, and it's just because of too much concentration.
Yep. I think diversification is a rule that you could apply to essentially everything in your life.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a really smart way of doing things.
Yeah.
Well, Damon, I feel like there are a lot of different directions we could go here, but what have we not talked about that you think we should talk about, or you think it's important to convey to our listeners?
This is the biggest reason why businesses don't sell, and that is value expectations of the seller. You really need to understand what your business is worth. Come to terms with that, because it is math. I can't pay $1 million for something that makes $100 a year. I don't care how great your idea is. I don't care how it. Now, you may find some unicorn where somebody's going to give you a lot of money for it, but you aren't getting that today. You're going to get that over time. The vast majority of people have to understand that if my business makes $1 million a year, there is a reasonable multiple on that $1 million you're going to get paid for that business. Bottom line, don't think you can get double because you're special. Just get in tune with that, get ready for that, just understand that, because it's much better for you to stay in your business a couple years longer. If that's not enough money, or that doesn't make you happy, and until that number will make you happy, or you grow into the number you want, then try to sell to, and get a premium that you're really not going to get. I mean, there are things that drive premiums, but vast majority of the businesses, if you get 25-30% premium over market, you better be operating pretty darn well compared to market. And value is the thing that trips everyone up.
Yeah, business owners typically overestimate the value of their business. We all know that. I just read an example of this, and I don't remember the specifics, but there was, somebody said, well, this guy sold his business. He sold it for $1 million, and he's just one town over, and he's got 8 employees, and they do this much in revenue, and they do, whatever. So say it's 500,000 in revenue, and they've got 8 employees. I've got 3 employees. My revenue is 150,000. So I figure mine's worth 800,000. Like like the owner thinks it's worth 80% of what the guy next door sold it for, but everything else doesn't match up, right? Like the math is not matching up in his head. It's just you overestimate the value of your own business, and that reality check, even though it's hard to deal with, that reality check is super important before going through a transaction.
Yeah, you don't want to waste your time doing it. I mean, get a realistic valuation from someone. And if you're not comfortable with it, you're saying, no way would I sell it for that much. Don't try. I mean, you're going to waste a year trying to sell that thing. Whereas if you come in, and because too, on a buyer's perspective, when they see stuff that's priced out of what normally it should be priced, they just don't even, it's not like you come and say, hey, I'll give you what it's really worth. They just don't even respond. And because they understand this, they know that this is the biggest reason why. So if you come with unrealistic value expectations, they're not even going to offer anything. Whereas if you come in with realistic value expectations, you'll bring 2 people to the table. Then you got a chance of working it up a little bit if you are above industry by a long ways. And it's just those things that you got to really come to terms with, because if it's worth $1 million, it's worth $1 million. It's not worth two.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think the biggest thing that anybody should take away from this is, while you're building your business, make sure that you're taking care of your own personal finances, so you're not 100% reliant on your business. So that's just another way of saying diversify your wealth, right?
Yep.
And then understand what a realistic expectation is. And then I would add to that, and this is not a money thing, but add to that, what is it that you're hoping to get from this transaction? What's most important to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the highest amount of money in your pocket is the most important to you, then you gotta share that with your advisors and know that that's the way that you're going to build towards that. If the most important thing to you is not that number, but it's the legacy of your business and your business being able to continue, you got to know that too, because that's a completely different buyer. It may be looking at like an ESOP, for example, instead, so that legacy continues. It's you have to know what it is you're working towards and why, and what's most important to you, and then surround yourself with the best advisors to help get you there.
Yep. Yeah. Wise advice there.
Yeah. So Damon, any closing comments for you? I can't believe we're up against an hour already.
No, I'm just happy to be here and enjoy sharing this, and hopefully someone, hears something that helps them.
Okay. So people want to reach out to you. They want help selling their business and the other services that you provide. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Our website, exityourway.com, is got plenty of links. You can schedule a time with me. You can email me. It's Damon, DAMON, at exityourway.com. Find me on LinkedIn. There's no one else with my name, Damon Pistulka, and any of those will work.
Okay. I really appreciate the conversation. Like I said at the beginning, we're kind of kindred spirits. We're working in the same area, doing the same type of work, not exactly the same. But it's something that you and I are both passionate about, right? The backbone of our economy in this country is the small business owner. Or I would even say small or medium, depends on your definition of what small business is. But that's what drives the economy in our country, and being able to help those people every day to make sure that that continues is a pleasure.
Yeah, it's an incredible feeling.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Damon. Really appreciate it, and look forward to staying in touch and keeping in touch with Exit Your Way.
All right. Thanks for having me, Austin.
You bet. Thank you.
You've been listening to Tycoons of Small Biz, a podcast for small business owners by small business owners. Join us next week for an introduction to another great tycoon, and be sure to follow us on our social media channels for links to all of our episodes and great content.